Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Hari Bo Hari Bo Nitai Gaur Hari Bo. Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna, welcome. Today we'll read from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 40, Text 10 and 11. Text 10. 11? You read 10 yesterday? Yeah, this says 11 and 12, sorry. Text 11. Sattvam Rajas Tama Iti Bhavata Prakritir Gunaha Teshu Hi Prakrita Prota Abhrama Stavara Adaya Sattvam Rajastama Iti Bhavata Prakritir Guna Teshu Hi Prakrita Prota Abhrama Stavara Adaya Sattvam Rajastama Iti Bhavata Prakritir Guna Teshu Hi Prakrita Prota Abrahmastavaradaya. Sattva Rajastama Iti Sattvam, goodness. Raja, passion. Tamaha, ignorance. Iti, thus known. Bhavataha, your. Prakrite, of the material nature. Gunaha, the qualities. Teshu, to them. He, certainly. Prakritaha, the conditioned living entities. Prota, woven. Woven. Abrahma, up to Lord Brahma. Stavara Adaya, starting with the non-moving creatures. Translation purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation: goodness, passion, and ignorance, the qualities of your material nature, entangle all conditioned living beings, from Brahma down to the non-moving creatures. And we also have text 12. There's no purport. I offer my obeisances to you, who as the supreme soul of all beings witness everyone's consciousness with unbiased vision. The current of your material modes produced by the force of ignorance flows strongly among the living beings who assume identities as demigods, humans, and animals. Om Jnanatirmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeyam Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalang Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavanishwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vansha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanan Pavanibhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Ram Ram Hare Hare. Translation again. Goodness, passion, and ignorance, the qualities of your material nature, entangle all conditioned living beings from Brahma down to the non-moving creatures. I offer my obeisances to you, who as the super soul of all beings witness everyone's consciousness with unbiased vision. The current of your material modes, produced by the force of ignorance, flows strongly among living entities who assume identities as demigods, humans, and animals. Sattvam rajastama iti bhavata prakritarguna teshu hi prakrita prota abrahmastavarādaya. So we hear that these different modes entangle all conditioned living beings, from Brahma down to the non-moving creatures. This is the situation of the material world. Teshu hi prakrita prota abrahmastavarādra, from Brahma, Abrahma bhuvana loka, from the highest planet down to the lowest, all are places of misery, wherein repeated birth and death occur, because they're here characterized by this flow of the material energy, material modes of nature. Goodness, passion, ignorance, the qualities of your material nature entangle all conditioned living beings, from Brahma down to the non-moving creatures. So this is what we see around us in the material world, is the various combinations of the modes of nature. This is all that's really going on here. And here we have beautiful prayers of Akrura, who's now received the darshan of the Lord. His life is perfect. After sojourning through many lifetimes, the conditioned soul gets a chance to hear about the Lord, engage in the process of bhakti, and at some point ultimately he achieves the completion of his material existence. At that point he or she becomes free from this entanglement of the material modes of nature. In the material world, it says here, goodness, passion, ignorance, qualities of material nature entangle all conditioned living beings. It says here they're woven, prota. So we are more or less woven into this material nature by our false ego. The qualities of material nature entangle all conditioned living beings from Brahma. So the soul is hankering after freedom. The soul needs to experience its intrinsic nature, the swarup, the chit, potency. Swarup means the intrinsic nature which is covered now in the material world, being influenced by the material modes of nature. Then we forget our original transcendental position. Vishnu Shakti Para Prokta Chaitra Gyakyam Tatapara Avidya Karma Samgyana Tritiya Shakti Ichate. There's three energies of the Lord: the internal, the external, and the marginal. And the marginal energies, although they belong to the superior energy, they become conditioned. They become attracted to the material energy, and therefore we disinherit ourselves from our own eternal nature. So here we've been hearing some beautiful prayers of Akrura, and the prayers of the great devotees, they always reiterate very deep constitutional truths, philosophical truths. And he's explaining how different people approach the Lord. They worship him in different ways. And he explained how the Vaishnavas, even those who worship other beings, they're actually only worshiping you. And today this text today, he's bringing this principle of the modes of material nature. So this is a very unique aspect of our philosophy, that we have an understanding of the gunas, because in many traditions or spiritual practices, they don't have a clear concept actually of the material energy. Sometimes they think if we just know about the spiritual nature, if we know about heaven or the kingdom of God, that's all we need. But what's unique about Bhagavad Gita and the Vedic texts is that they explain not only the transcendental realm, but also very minutely about the material realm, which is very important for the conditioned souls. If we only understand or hear about this transcendental realm, then we can easily get misconceptions, or we can get sentimental, and that we don't actually know how to extricate ourselves, or we don't understand the real nature of our own predicament in the material world. So the Bhagavad Gita and other Srimad Bhagavatam, etc., they give very, very continuous information about the modes of nature, about the gunas, and increasingly detailed descriptions about how the living entity gets entrapped by the modes of nature, how they bind him, and ultimately how he can become liberated from them. There's whole sections of Srimad Bhagavatam which explain, how through cultivating higher modes of nature, how everything in this world is composed of the different modes, how they act on the living entity, how ultimately the soul can get completely freed through the process of bhakti. So there's no purports on these texts today, and I think we should just stick to these texts because it's sized out. So I'll just read this translation again. Goodness, passion, and ignorance, the qualities of your material nature, entangle all conditioned living beings, from Brahma down to the non-moving creatures. So, as we mentioned, the soul is hankering after freedom. Prabhupada says we want to see the light, we want to experience, we don't like to be bound up. If you have any animal, any insect, or any human being, if you restrict their freedom, they protest. So that's on a material, external level. But the soul doesn't like being bound up. The soul, we've become enchained by our own misconceptions, by our own consciousness. So that Sri Ishopanishad says we should not become an Atmaha, one who kills their own soul. This means that the consciousness has become so afflicted that it limits the inherent nature of the living entity. So after millions of lives, the consciousness gradually blossoms. There's different stages of budding, opening, then blossom, and then fully blossomed consciousness is the consciousness of a pure devotee, someone who's facilitated the soul to awaken to its highest level. And this, of course, is best enacted by the chanting of the Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So to be in touch with to be in touch with Krishna is to be in touch with our true self. It's to awaken us from the slumber. The material modes of nature, they put us into a sleep-like condition, a dream state, a comatose state. It's unreal. Just like the horse eggs or the sky flowers. It's something that has no position in reality. So actually the entire material dream, it doesn't affect the soul. Hyayam Purusho. The soul is always aloof from the material energy. But we are unfortunately identifying with it, identifying with that which is not. That's what Maya is. So you can imagine like a seed, it wants to grow, but if you put a big fence around it, you see how it suffers. It can't get the sunlight, or it gets trapped. It tries to go this way. So like this, the consciousness of the soul becomes hindered by these modes of nature. And therefore Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita try to really educate us so we can, with their guidance, and they engage in the process of freedom from the modes of nature. So we know there's 8,400,000 different species of life. And these are all different combinations of being under the influence of the modes of nature. These modes, sattvam, rajas, tamas, entangle all conditioned living beings, from Brahma down to the non-moving creatures. So anywhere where you see life in the material world, there's some combination of these modes. And especially in human beings, we see various levels of consciousness. We see various habits, various patterns, various cultures. They're all just different combinations of material energy. It's all pervasive. It says here, it's woven through this material nature. So Akrura is offering these prayers because he's reached that state of transcendence beyond the modes. What lies beyond the modes of nature? That's the transcendental position, or Shuddha Sattva. So prayer is a very effective means to meditate on how Krishna himself is transcendental and how we also have a transcendental aspect of our being. That to remain bound up, entangled by the modes of nature is unnatural for us. That's step one, is to realize that this material world, the way I'm living, this everything I know basically is unnatural. I don't want to make this my home, my hearth and home, and think, yeah, I'll just settle in here and create so many different ways to deeply root myself to something that is ultimately unreal. It's ultimately distinct from the transcendental reality. So step one is to really awaken a desire that this is not natural. This is not a sane condition. Until we come to that point, then the spiritual progress is impeded. And Akur also describes how these modes affect different beings. The current of your material modes, produced by the force of ignorance, flows strongly among living beings, who assume identities as demigods, humans, and animals. So we become so absorbed in things that have nothing to do with us. And this is, as it says here, this is the produced by the force of ignorance. So we're very infected by these modes of nature. Now what's interesting is that Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains why, I'll ask you all a question, why do the modes of nature exist? Does anyone have an answer? Why did the modes exist? To control us? Anyone else? Desires? Why is this phenomenon here, existing in the material world? Anyone else? Yeah. The Maya Shakti. So Krishna designed it this way to have 3 different modes. Why not 4? Why not 5? Anyone else? Mm-hmm. So, Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains in some of his books in Sri Krishna Samhita that the original spiritual potency of the Lord has these 3 aspects: Sandini, Hladini, and Samvit. So in the pure spiritual nature, there's 3 divisions. The Sandini is this is presided by Balaram. It comprises the spiritual world, all of the paraphernalia. The Samvit, or the knowledge potency, the Chit, and Hladini, which is the ecstatic, the energy actually of love of Godhead. So what he explains is that in the pure form, all of these potencies are obviously engaged in the Lord's service, and they facilitate pure love. They facilitate the love of the exchanges of love between the Lord and His devotees. So that's like the sane, healthy position. And this is the state we're always hankering for. You know, what are we doing in this material world entangled with these modes? We're looking for happiness. We're just looking to be reconnected, to be harmonious, to be at peace. We look for it in millions of unlimited different ways. We try this, we try that, and it never gives the soul the happiness it's looking for. But here in the spiritual world, we see how living entities do find happiness. It's simply by being connected with their source. It doesn't take anything external, anything material, anything outside of us, really. That's the presentation of Maya, that you need something outside of yourself to be happy. And that's what drives the world. That's what drives, or the mode of passion. But in that realm, we know that maybe we'll read one verse about it. I worship that transcendental seat known as Sveta Dvip, whereas loving consorts, the Lakshmis, in their unalloyed spiritual essence, practice the amorous service of the Supreme Lord Krishna as their only lover, where every tree is a transcendental purpose tree, where the soil is the purpose gem, all water is nectar, every word is a song, every gait is a dance, the flute is the favorite attendant, effulgence is full of transcendental bliss, and the supreme spiritual entities are all enjoyable and tasty, where numberless milk cows always emit transcendental oceans of milk, where there is eternal existence of transcendental time, who is ever present and without past or future, and hence is not subject to the quality of passing away even for the space of half a moment. That realm is known as Goloka only to a very few self-realized souls in this world. So here we have this description. This is also of Lord Brahma, who is mentioned here in this purport. From Brahma, Brahma Bhuvanaloka, from Brahma, the highest living being, to the lowest. Brahma here has this transcendental reality, actually. Here we see that he's received the darshan of Goloka, which is known to only very few self-realized souls in this world, and we get to hear these descriptions. So the idea is that these descriptions awaken our desire to come out of the sleep-like condition and re-engage in the Lord's service. It's based on the hearing and chanting process, based on hearing these transcendental messages. It's meant to awaken the soul. So all the sadhana that we're doing is meant to facilitate the soul to be receptive to these messages. When the soul hears and gets a taste, becomes attracted, that's the impetus then to achieve the transcendental realm and not be satisfied by any of the other options that the modes of material nature will present one. Heaven, Svarga, all these different realms, there's 14 planetary systems. You can choose. Krishna has given us free will, where you want to hang out, how you want to enjoy, which department you want to be in, you know? So that's the nature of this. It sometimes describes this side of the Viraja river. And there's another side also. There's a transcendental side, the transcendental reality. And when the pure devotees come here, they awaken, the sleeping souls. They awaken. It's like you lived your whole life on that side of the street, and you thought that's all there was. You didn't know there was another street. So the whole material world, everyone is here in this one little universe, or in a different universe, and they're thinking, this is all there is, this is all we know. And the devotees come, the acharyas come, the residents of the spiritual world come here. They say there's a whole nother part of existence, a whole nother part of reality that you might not have known about. So these are, this is such a famous description, of course, in Sri Brahma Samhita, how the description of the pure state of the conditioned soul, where in their unalloyed spiritual essence, devotees practice the service of Supreme Lord as their only lover. Every tree is a purpose tree, a kalpavriksha. And it's explained that the kalpavrikshas, in the spiritual world, they don't just give fruits, but they give actually love. What is it, if sometimes you hear about these cows giving milk and the trees giving fruits in the spiritual world. And you think, that's nice, but I can get fruits here, I can get milk here. What's so special there? Just getting some fruits, it's not so good. No, the fruits and the milk, it's transcendental emotion. Everything in the spiritual world is conscious. So actually they give love and they facilitate love. Everything in the spiritual world just stimulates a new attraction, appreciation for Krishna. And of course, every word is a song, Every gait is a dance, and the flute is the favorite attendant. So this paints a vision of the healthy state of a living entity that are free from the material modes of nature, that are not bound by this. So what happens is these Sandini, Hladini, and Samvid, that original internal energy, when it becomes reflected in the material world, it manifests as the modes of nature. The Hladini Shakti, in the material world, it manifests as the Sattva gun, and the Sandini as Tamagun, and the Chit as Tamagun, as Rajagun. So that's why we see everything, and this is also really opens our eyes up to the unity and the oneness of the Lord of existence. That everything exists here because it's a reflection of the pure spiritual form. So there's no real dichotomy, there's no real duality. There's a transcendental oneness, but based on our conditioning under the modes, we perceive it in different ways. But ultimately, it all, Janmadasya yataha, everything comes from the absolute truth. This is a very deep statement, actually. Everything comes from the absolute truth. That has enough potent Shakti to be Krishna conscious in any time and place. We really think everything emanates from the absolute truth. So we have to see reality in connection with its source. So I just found this was a very, very interesting point and very important to understand how these modes are simply reflections of the transcendental internal energies of the Lord. So it's like, when you see animals when they get caught, when they get in a trap, how much they suffer, how much they try to free themselves, or fish if they get caught in a net. So in a way that may not be as apparent, but the human beings in this world, it's like being in a trap that you don't even know that you're in the trap. Being entangled, but you think you're free. What could be worse? If you know you're trapped, at least you can get out. But if you don't even know that you're trapped, it's a very sad state. You're not going to be able to get free. So therefore, Krishna, and we mentioned how there's this information about the gunas, which is a unique, I would say, theological contribution to religion, which allows us to understand not only the spiritual realm, not only God, but also why we are trapped here. And the next text mentions that we assume the identities as demigods, humans, and animals. So the problem is that we assume a conditioned nature and we identify with it so closely that it creates its false ego, and the ego is what blocks us from Krishna. It's like, forgive the example, but let's say you're covered in stool and you go before the altar, or you go before someone and you say, hey, I just want to hug you, So the ego is like that. We come before the Lord and we have a gross level of consciousness, thinking we're great, thinking we're better than others, thinking we're so wonderful, and then we take that into our japa. Just imagine you're very dirty, and you sit down and right? People go away. They don't want to do it. They don't want anything to do with that. So that's like the stench of the false ego. We pick up our beads. We sit down to chant. Think, now I'm going to chant nice kirtan. We were covered, Ew, people think, ew, what is that? What's wrong with that person? And so we think we can worship the Lord in that impure state. So then that's the ego that it's so subtle that we can't even detect it, It pervades everything we do. Only by the very powerful association of pure devotees, those who are free from that, they can then expose it. You hear so many stories of Prabhupada. People would just come in slight contact with Prabhupada and It's like they just got cut. And all of this stuff that they were carrying just gets cut off. So, we need that. That's very good for us. We should desire that. I want to cleanse my soul. I want to cleanse my soul from all of the rubbish I've accumulated over many, many lifetimes. So, these different identities, they're stored in the mind, in the ego. We have this voice in our head. It's ego. There's a lot of ego there. The true voice of the soul is not, we can't really hear it. We're hearing my conditioned identity. And for many of us Westerners, or even Easterners, it's a very scary conditioning that we, really it's like a trauma. It's like we're carrying a trauma. When traumatized people, they usually have to go to therapy, they have to get help, they have to. So even if you had a great upbringing in India or in a nice cultured family, in this material world, it's all trauma. We're traumatized. We don't know how to connect with our true soul. We don't know how to connect with God. So this can then help awaken humility. And then the humility is the magic element. This is the magic potion that allows us from being so contaminated, so impure, so unqualified. But if the humility is there, that's the game changer. That's what can allow all of the Lord's mercy to come. If you're covered in stool, it's not very good. It's a bummer. You gotta cleanse. But if you're very humble about it, if you're very humble, then you can be helped. But if you're proud, then it can't happen. So this is the magic potion, and then in Kali Yuga, Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, they come specifically for people like us, specifically people who are really dirty, really covered, and they just want to see this humility. That's the key to getting their mercy. Chenadapi sunichena, tarorapi seshnuna, manina manadena, kirtaniya shadahari. That's what they're looking for. They're not looking for a big qualification, big pundit, or big, even we're doing so much seva, or we can do so many nice things, or we can manage things, or whatever we're doing. That's not really what they're going to impress them. They're going to be impressed if we're carrying a very, very deep, like very overshadowing, all-encompassing, absolute. Actually, the humility has to become absolute. Absolute means that it doesn't change. It won't be affected by things like, oh, we did something nice, or someone else appreciates us. That's how our ego gets boosted a lot. Even we don't think we did something good, but someone else appreciates it, we think, oh, wow, maybe it was good, yeah. Well. So the absolute humility, that's the quality of all the pure devotees. Those who are free from the modes, they have the absolute humility. So Gaur-Nitai are giving the process and the means and this ingredient that we need to try to cultivate to protect ourselves from our own worst enemy. If we don't deal with this, it's like you're living with a venomous serpent in your heart. Imagine there's like a deadly cobra, and he's right next to you, side by side. You're gonna live. The way you're gonna live is a little different. Is a little cautious. So unless we try to tame that ego, it can instantly just destroy us, devastate. It can ruin our life, ruin our whole devotional life, ruin a relationship, ruin anything. So we are living with the dangerous, sometimes undetected enemy. If you know about the snake also, then you can keep an eye on it. You don't even know he's there, then we're really in trouble. So these are some reflections on this text today. Thank you for your tolerance and attendance. Anyone like to comment or ask a question?
Hare Krishna, bro. Thank you for wonderful class. You mentioned in the class that we have to realize this is not our natural state.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Staying here for a long time, it became a second nature to understand this is a natural state. So how to realize that we are living in unnatural state of soul as a soul?
Yeah, we have to associate with advanced devotees. They know it's not natural. It's like you're on that side of the street and everyone's on that side. You think, hey, this is normal. This is where we live. This is it. There's nothing else to have. So then everyone thinks, yeah, this is normal. But someone only who's from that side, when they come over, then they can make it very clear. So the prescription sadhu sangha, sarva shastrikoi, lavamatra sadhu sangha sarva siddhihai. All the Vedas say the best thing you should try to associate with sadhus. Try to seek out higher association, people who are not unbewildered. Right? Krishna says that in the 15th chapter. The one who's unbewildered, they can cut down this deeply rooted tree, this banyan tree, this beautiful description, which is modes of nature basically. The twigs, the leaves, the flowers, the senses, the sense objects. Someone who's unbewildered, they can cut the root of this tree. So we want to try to find those people that will help. Yeah. Thank you.
And, yeah, very nice class. But you say like a Sambhit refers to, no, Sandhini refers to your Balaram. So, what other two things are referring to whom?
Well, we know Hladini Shakti. Hladini Shakti, you know that, yeah. So, Samvit, I don't know who is the presiding deity
Maybe
of Samvit.
Pradyumna?
Huh?
Pradyumna in
Yeah,
charge
it
of
could
life?
be like that. I don't know for sure. Yeah. That's a good question. Anything else?
Um, your description of persons, um, as the verse describes, being entangled in the modes of material nature, is actually as individuals being traumatized or traumatized individuals unknowingly. So, and you were pointing to the ego being such, or a kind of identity that's formed, is part of that condition. So that move to another reality, a transcendental soul reality, that's dismantling of that ego or the things that are identified with, even if it's coming from a traumatized place, it seems it would be more firmly held onto just because of it being a condition of trauma. So I guess the question would be what allows for that move away from holding on so desperately to ego, identity aspects in that traumatized condition.
Yeah, usually I think sometimes it's by force. Sometimes sick people, they have to be forced to get help. They may not want to, but they may have to do an intervention. They may have to, a little bit of motivation beyond even their own desire to get healthy. So this is what the pure devotees and the acharyas do. Then they shake us, they they've kind of forced us to take up a process to heal ourselves. Like Srila Prabhupada, he said, if you want to join the society, you have to follow this. These are the rules. You have to follow these regulative principles. I say, I don't really want to. I'm used to this. This is just my nature. But they come and they more or less force us. Our good quality is that we accept them and we agree to follow them. But then they more or less force us to get healthy. So this is why it's very important, both sides. On the side of the aspirants, I want to get better. I'm not able to get better on my own. But I accept a doctor. And now I'm going to follow what this doctor says, even if I don't like it. Then the doctor knows, okay, now I've got the patient. I can really help, because they're committed. They're going to follow the prescription. So now I can just, push them a little bit. No, you can't wake up at that time. You have to wake up at this time. No, you can't eat that. You have to eat this. So then that force, I think, is required in a certain way that helps someone who's so conditioned, so entangled, to change. Because that's the sad thing. On our own volition, we wouldn't do it. We'd be stuck here in the material world forever. We don't have the power. The conditioned soul doesn't have the power to get free or to liberate himself. It depends on the mercy of someone who's not bound like that. So this is why another aspect is this dependence, and that can be a meditation for humility. That we couldn't get out of here. We're dependent on this, this ingress of mercy that's coming in. Okay. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.